Today on episode number 926 of the School of Podcasting, we have a cool Because of My Podcast story. I'm going to talk about what YouTube had to say at Podcast Movement. I've got a fun giveaway. We're going to talk about boiling monetization down to one single question, thanks to my good friends Kevin and Harry. And we're all getting in line and screaming shame at people who are doing really bad things to the podcasting space. Hit it, ladies.
The School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson.
Podcasting since 2005. I am your award-winning Hall of Fame podcast coach, Dave Jackson. Thanking you so much for tuning in. If you're new to the show, so glad you're here. This is where we talk about planning, launching, growing, and if you want to, monetizing your podcast. My website is schoolofpodcasting.com. Use the coupon code LISTENER, that's LISTENER, when you sign up for either a monthly or yearly subscription. And if you're like, I don't know, well, remember, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. And a few years ago, I thought, man, I got to come up with a new way of saying, really, seriously, I'm talking to you. You should start a podcast. And so I started sharing some of the things that have happened to me that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have a podcast. And I was like, hey, that seems to work. So I started asking you, hey, what has happened to you that wouldn't have happened except, well, you had a podcast?
Welcome to Because of My Podcast, where we spotlight the results people are achieving because of their podcast.
I often, when I'm doing webinars for Libsyn, refer to him as Brian the Video Guy. You might know him as Brian Connington. He is all over the Libsyn YouTube channel. He is our primary video editor and primary video guy. And he told me the story, and I go, dude, that's a Because of My Podcast story.
Hey, Dave, this is Brian Coddington from the Cinema Psycho Show at cinemapsychoshow.com, and I have a Because of My Podcast story. So my podcast has been around since 2016, and when you're a movie podcast, more often than not, you get press emails and things like that. And back in December, I had got an email for the new movie Wonka at the time. And I had done something that I usually had never done before, and that is that I reached out to the studio. I was interested in covering Wonka and wanted to get access to a press screener. Now, what I did was very simply is contact Warner Brothers PR agency, and I was surprised that I actually got an email back from them. And it was an email saying that they were going to add my podcast to their PR agency so that we get access to screeners in the future. Unfortunately, they didn't have a screener for us for Wonka, but that was okay because the payoff really came about a month later when we got access to our very first press screener of the movie Mean Girls. And my co-host John and I, we went out to it. We had a great time, and it actually led to us creating a series of episodes based on it, and a short that went up on YouTube and blew up. We're talking like got 1 million+ views, all from just talking directly to the movie studios and getting access to their press materials. So I got to tell you, for any movie podcasts out there, really contact the studios if you can. But it's amazing what just having a podcast and building that network and building those relationships and connections can do for yourself and getting you noticed with those different entities. So that's my story. And of course, if you like movies with a bit of comedy, be sure to check out my show, The Cinema Psycho Show, at cinemapsychoshow.com. Thanks again.
cinemapsychoshow.com. Yeah, Brian watches bad movies so you don't have to. And you say, what do you mean? Yeah, he actually watched Leprechaun 4, but not just Leprechaun 4, Leprechaun 4 in space. And the question is it so bad it's good? I'll have a link to that out at schoolofpodcasting.com/926.
The School of Podcasting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I almost want to call this Conspiracy Corner, or I will tell you so later. But if you're new to the show, it drives me nuts that people keep calling YouTube a podcast because it's not. It's a show. It's definitely a show. But YouTube, which is owned by Google, was at Podcast Movement, and they did this presentation, And this is the kind of thing that drives me nuts.
First, let's start with the shift that we're seeing in podcasting overall, kind of industry-wide, and that's consumers are embracing video more than ever before.
Said the guy who works for YouTube, the largest video option on the internet that basically lives and breathes via advertising.
When we look at the numbers, Triton Digital, Cumulus Media, and Coleman Insights have all published studies in the past year which show that YouTube, at least in their books, is now the #1 podcast consumption app, podcast platform in the world.
Sure makes it sound like you should have your stuff on there. And by the way, Triton Digital, Cumulus, and Coleman, yeah, all people that work in the advertising space. Now, again, I'm going to repeat myself. If you have the time and the budget, absolutely you should do something on YouTube. It's just these kind of comments that make people think if you're not on YouTube, you're an absolute idiot. And I'm here to say, consider, always consider the source. Now, they did say some things that make total sense, like 30% of shows that get discovered on YouTube are on YouTube, yeah, because they have that algorithm. It does a great job of like, hey, if you like this, you might like this. And if you also watch videos of people who are leaving YouTube, they say they're tired of being slave to the algorithm. You're not really serving your audience. You try to with your content, but a lot of your efforts is for serving the algorithm. I will give them credit. They are trying to interact more with podcasters on April 26th from 12 to 1 p.m. That is Pacific time, or 3 to 4 if you're on the Eastern time. They're doing a podcasting 101, which is somewhat interesting from YouTube because, well, again, I'm going to put on my curmudgeon hat. It's a show. You're a YouTuber. You're not a podcast. So I'm going to be interested to see how they spin that. I've mentioned before that if you're using a service like Libsyn and you're already pushing your show to YouTube, you don't have to do a thing. They talked about how if you're already doing video, you can go in and go, I dub thee a podcast. Or if you're not using a media host that can push things to YouTube, you can basically have YouTube pull in your RSS feed. And here they explain, like, what's the benefit? What's in it for you putting your stuff on YouTube?
Well, why does that matter, right? So I think you'll get things like the badging, eligibility for the destination page that I talked about, some of those search experiences that I talked about. But more importantly, what it does is it informs the algorithm. And a large portion of what my team works on also is how do we improve podcast discovery? If I'm consuming an episode, we should probably recommend the next episode when you're done. In the YouTube environment, that isn't necessarily the intuitive thing because YouTube wants to recommend all kinds of stuff to you. You know, if you've seen your right rail or you've seen your watch next bar, you might get recommended, very far afield content. And so some of the work that we're doing in terms on the algorithm side is how do we support really podcast consumption use cases, which is if I listen to the first episode, I probably want to listen to the next episode. And so that's some of the work that we're doing. And that's some of the benefits of designating your content as a podcast.
And stats in YouTube are amazing. They are like miles ahead of what you get in podcasting because podcasting is open and YouTube is not. The only place you can watch YouTube is on YouTube. It's being served by YouTube. And so this is why many people get obsessed with the algorithm. And Steve from YouTube mentioned the algorithm.
Folks are intimidated by the algorithm. And I mean, I'm not going to explain it because I actually don't fully understand it myself.
Now, who is Steve? That is Steve McClendon. He's the product lead for podcasts on YouTube. Now, that's not really fair. I'm taking that out of context. And really, Steve is the product lead for podcasts. And maybe he's not super YouTube kind of enlightened. He's in the podcast. He is the right hand that is podcast, where YouTube is the left hand, which is video. So that's not really fair. I just found it very odd that a guy representing YouTube on the stage said, yeah, I don't quite get the algorithm either. And so my brain, to talk about me for a second, my brain goes, look, dude, if you can't figure it out, how am I supposed to figure it out? Going back to YouTube stats, the one thing that they do that is really kind of an Achilles heel for podcasts is you can see how people found you, which is great because then you can focus on doing more of that. And he did point out one thing that I was like, he's got a point there when it comes to the difference between a podcast based on an RSS feed, which is really the definition of that, or YouTube. One thing that's better on the YouTube side is this.
One difference with YouTube versus RSS is in RSS, somebody might subscribe to your show and they sort of, basically download every episode because, they might have set up auto downloads in their podcast app. And that will give you a view that sort of is very linear in terms of your consumption, but that might not actually be how people are listening to your content. And on YouTube, it's really important for us that we represent what's actually happening here.
And I'll be talking more about that, how auto downloads, look, I like auto downloads because I want every item on my phone, but it would be another really big haircut. But it would be interesting if all the apps set the default to click to play and then let the user like me go, no, I want it to automatically download, so that we would have, again, a clear picture of people who are really consuming our content. We'll talk more about that in a second. Steve unknowingly really triggered me because when they got to the what's next section, here's how YouTube is going to embrace podcasting. Steve said this.
But the way that I describe it internally is like, how do you make podcasts a first-class citizen on YouTube?
Why is that triggering? Because when they launched Google Podcast, the thing they just killed, they said they were going to do the exact same thing to Google Podcasts, and they did for a while. Podcasts were coming up in search results. The problem is there's no ads on those, and they don't make any money. One of the things they are bringing is in the future, you will be able to submit your show to YouTube as a destination. It would have been nice if that was available now. Because what's going to happen, said the guy who works in support, is everybody who has a host that doesn't allow you to do this already is going to go over to YouTube and go pull my RSS feed into YouTube. Then they're going to roll out a tool that says, here, now you can push your show to YouTube, and people are going to do both, and lots of duplicates are going to be made. Put that one in the book. That prediction is coming true. I had mentioned the algorithm a little bit ago and how you have to learn how YouTube works for this to really rank on your show. And here, Steve talks about this again. One of the guys at YouTube just launched his first podcast, even though he has a YouTube channel, which to me goes, wait a minute, wasn't his YouTube channel a podcast before? Because enough of that. But here's what they said about the algorithm and thumbnails. And I'm playing this because I have people go, should I be making separate thumbnails for each episode? Well, if you want to rank on Google.
Todd heads up search and algorithms for all of YouTube. And he talks about the importance of thumbnails. And that might not be the kind of thing that you as a podcaster would have front of mind, but thumbnails are incredibly important in, new discovery and new audience building on YouTube when you're sort of sitting in this visual environment.
So, like I said, YouTube has some events coming up, and I will be attending those to report back. But the thing, again, that drives me nuts is they are calling videos on YouTube a podcast. And I know you've heard me complain about that a million times. But, hey, you might get a badge.
We don't need no stinking budget. Oh, no.
Something else that came out at Podcast Movement Evolutions was a story by Ashley Carmen, who I am deeming the Mike Wallace of podcasting. She's amazing. And I mentioned back in episode 915 on an episode called Will Verified Downloads Ruin Podcast Advertising? And I'm kind of depressed about this because it is proving once again that when large amounts of money are involved, human beings make poor choices. They throw their morals to the side and off they go. And so there's a company called Mopod, and I know the guy at Mopod. He's super outgoing, super friendly, really nice guy. And I've always kind of been like, what you doing over there again? Because there are these companies. There was another one. There was a booth at Podcast Movement. And if it sounds like this, we promote your show on other websites. And if one of their examples is Yahoo, have you seen Yahoo lately? But if they're like, oh, like legitimate sites like Yahoo, like, oh, okay. And then they send them to a page that they build using their player, not your player from Buzzsprout or Libsyn or Blueberry. No, we're using our player. That to me is a red flag. And so they set up, it's almost like going to a jeweler where they have the good jewelry for the peasants up front. But if you want to see the good stuff, you got to go to the back of the room, right? So they take it to the back and there's all the major stuff. Well, their Mopod has their boost feature where they do that whole we advertise. And again, that's a little shady. But they have this other one where they are basically putting your show in front of video games, like in video games. Now, one side of that is, oh, great, my ad is going to be put in front of a bunch of 12-year-old boys. But there is that other side that says, hey, I know a lot of guys in their 30s and 40s playing video games. Like, that is their thing. So I kind of get that. And from what I understand, you had to follow the show. And so in the interview with Ashley Carmen on Bloomberg, they interviewed Mike Winston. And he said in an interview that it's a crucial distinction in his product. The company drives traffic to Mopod landing pages and hopes that users will be intrigued enough to tap through and follow. As for why Mopod doesn't advertise this tool wildly or tell partners exactly how it all works, he said it's to protect the company's competitive advantages. So, in other words, if he is KFC, that's their 11 herbs and spices. Not so much it's shady and fraudulent. Okay. And he says it's not challenging to create a landing page and set something up, he said. It's not something we wanted to highlight to the entire universe. Wait, so the thing that's easy to set up, a landing page, you promote. The thing, I guess the secret sauce, you don't want to blab to everyone. He says the website ads are a lot more challenging, he added, which is why the team publicly shares that. Oh, so they are hard to show. Okay, but this one that's so easy, well, if it's so easy, then why not share it? It's, the whole thing just smells a little fishy. Customers pay $5 per new follower. So if you're thinking about this, hey, if you get 100 new followers, I hope you got $500. Actually, you're going to need more than 500 because the required minimum is $5,000. And the interesting thing that was kind of sad is Ashley looked into this and she identified 37 podcasts being advertised through in-game rewards provided by Mopod, including shows from prominent creators and networks, including Wondery, Netflix, iHeartMedia, Lemonada, and Alex Cooper of Call Her Daddy. And let me be the first to say this. Shame on you. What are you doing? What are you doing? Because in the end, if the advertiser doesn't get their content in front of the right people and the ad doesn't perform well, they're going to not advertise anymore in podcasting. It's like when you were a kindergartner. Hey, we're going on a field trip. Remember, you're representing our school. So everyone grab your buddy, hold hands, and let's go to the bus in a nice, orderly fashion. And instead, you're going to the bus peeing on everything and screaming and yelling. So it just sounds really bad. And it sounds like something, unfortunately, that if Mopod is the leader in this type of thing, that other companies are going, hey, I think we figured out what they're doing. And they're also creating these things that, on one hand, again, if we keep ourselves legal here, they are providing verified downloads, which means that behind the scenes, they had at least a minute of content downloaded. They're not providing verified listens. So if you get into that space, start asking, is that a verified listen? Because we got people that, here we go, big money, right? Big Daddy, what's her name? Call Her Daddy. She's got a lot of a bank. And when you get that plate in the air and you're spinning it, you got to do anything to keep that plate spinning. And that's where bad decisions based on making more money often happen.
In
missed it. It's time for a podcast rewind.
Hi, School of Podcast listeners. I'm Jody Krangle from the Audio Branding Podcast, and I had Dave on my show to talk about podcasting, of course, and the power of sound, which is what my podcast is about. He shared a lot of great information and stories, so I think you'll get a lot from hearing what he had to say. Thanks for listening.
Sound was always in my house. The other fun part is I always have sound in my head because I grew up in bands and very much if it's too loud, you're too old, man. And that's all fun and good until you're, later and you
can't
notice
hear anymore.
you can't hear anymore. And the only thing you hear is this lovely thing called the ring of tinnitus. So
yes.
I do not like silence because the minute, like just now I said the word tinnitus and it's like in my head.
Okay.
Yes. So that's the other thing when it comes to sound that I'm like, I hate silence because it makes my ear ringing just, kick into gear.
That must be hard for peace. Yeah. I don't know.
It
How
can
do
be.
you get your peace then if it's not with silence?
I don't. In a nutshell,
Okay.
I just had my best friend from forever was in town and we're trying to squeeze him into my schedule. He goes, dude, when do you relax? I go, what exactly is that again? Yeah. And the cool thing about it, I am on her show this week. That's part 1. So she broke me into a 2-parter. We had a great time. Jody's amazing. And I'll have links to her show as always at schoolofpodcasting.com/927, or you can just go over to voiceoverandvocals.com. That is her website. And again, the show is Audio Branding.
The School of Podcasting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I got lucky. 2 of my friends were on the same podcast. My buddy Harry Duran, who does Podcast Junkies. Harry, congrats on 10 years, by the way. Interviewed Kevin Schmidlin, and Kevin was on my show. It's been a while since he was on here. I didn't realize that. He was back on episode 812. I'll have links to all those out at our website, schoolofpodcasting.com/927. But Kevin said something that I was like, that's so simple, and yet it makes so much sense. And that is, we talked a little bit today about advertising, and I've always said, and so does Kevin, that the best way to make money is to sell your own product or service. But when it comes to making money with your podcast, if you think about this, and this is kind of one of those duh, but on the other hand, very wise, and Kevin shared this on the episode with Harry. He said, if you want to make money with your podcast, there's only one way to do it. And that's when everybody leans in. And then he says this, and he goes, you have to sell something. And again, you kind of go, duh. But what he means, though, if you think about it, if you're selling your own product or service, your customer is paying you. Now, if you are selling ads, you're like, yeah, I'm getting paid by my advertiser. And you're like, yep. And who is paying them? That's right. One of the things that I'm sad to see this whole let's kind of just inflate our numbers in ways that aren't entirely white hat is if that messes up advertising for those people that have enough downloads to get advertising and it goes away because, well, if you're, sending people to a robot or to some sort of fake download, fake downloads can't buy anything. And that's the bottom line. Your listeners, again, need to go buy that advertiser's product for that to work. And if they don't, the advertiser goes away. But once again, you're selling something and your listeners are paying for it, whether it's a product from one of your sponsors or it's a product you sell, or I guess that's a product you sell, any kind of crowdfunding, Patreon, Supercast, et cetera, it's your audience that is spending money. You are talking your audience into spending money. And I just wanted to throw that out there because I was like, that is so simple and yet so true. So if you want to monetize, what are you going to have your audience pay for? And for me, this is where I go, find the best product that gives them the most value. And that's why selling your own product or service, typically, because you can really customize it to your audience, is the best for them and the most profit for you. And I am always awful at promoting my own stuff. I am almost done. I'm getting there with my audiobook. If you go to profitfromyourpodcast.com/book, you'll see where you can buy the book there, but you can also now get it as an audiobook. And the beauty of the audiobook is if you do this now, before the audiobook is officially complete, the book's done. I just haven't finished recording the audio for it, but you're going to be able to then ask questions, and that's going to be the bonus section of the audiobook. There's going to be quite a bit of bonus stuff because there were things like, I don't know, podcasting 2.0 didn't exist when I wrote the book in 2020. So if you want to monetize your show, and for the record, you can be like my buddy Craig over at livewellandflourish.com. He's also got AI Goes to College. But I know Live Well and Flourish, he's not interesting. He's not interesting. Well, he is very interesting. He's a professor, really nice guy, but he's not interested in making money with that show. He just wants to help people live well and flourish. So again, in the same way, to kind of tie it up here, we heard the YouTube people explain how, YouTube is the best thing since sliced bread. It'll do your laundry. It'll, all that stuff, which makes you think you have to be on YouTube. And again, if you got the time, the bandwidth, and the money, sure. But so many people also think my podcast is a failure because I'm not making any money at it. And I just like to remind people, you don't have to make money with your podcast. It's called a hobby. It's getting warm here in April of 2024, and I'm going to, dig out my bike, pump up the tires, because come May, I'll probably be able to start riding it, and I'll probably take it to the bike shop, and they'll grease the chain, and I know last year I had to buy new tires, so it cost me a couple $100. I've never made a dime riding my bike, and yet what's weird about that is, what's your hobby? Like mine is riding my bike. And I've never had somebody go, so what, you ride that bike? And I go, yeah, I try to at least weekly. I've never had somebody go, so you making any money at that? No, I'm just enjoying nature and trying to get some exercise. But if you say, oh yeah, I do a podcast. I do it actually weekly. People, oh really? You making any money at that? I always thought that was kind of weird. So again, you don't have to make money with your podcast if you don't want to. And if you want to, you have to figure out when your audience takes money out of their purse, out of their wallet, out of their, when they bust that card out, what do you want them to buy? As I record this, it is April 2024, and I'm giving away 30 minutes of consulting if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/giveaway. Normally, I would put this in dynamically, but wanted to throw it in here because there's something else going along with this, and that is we're going to record our coaching call, and I may use it in a future episode of the School of Podcasting, which will give you even more exposure. This is for everyone. It doesn't have to be someone who hasn't launched. It could be someone who has launched. It's somebody, whatever you need consulting on, schoolofpodcasting.com/giveaway will give you access to winning a free half hour. So if you're interested in that, schoolofpodcasting.com/giveaway. You need to join the drawing by the end of April. And if you're new to the show, the one thing I never want to do is waste your time, and I'm out of content for this episode, so we're going to cut it here. If you want to start a podcast, if you want to grow your podcast, if you want to monetize your show, come visit me, schoolofpodcasting.com/listener, or type in listener when you get to the coupon code. Remember, that comes absolutely worry-free. Anytime within that first 30 days, you go, yeah, I don't think this is for me, happily give you your money back. So if you've been thinking like, I don't know about them, I'm not sure, yeah, come on over, sign up, join the community, check out the courses, check out the coaching. It's all there, schoolofpodcasting.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next week, take care, God bless. Class is dismissed. Kind of a shorter show today. I have to start my taxes. Yay, capitalism. I can't wait to give my money to a government that spends it on things that I would never spend it on and pretty much not tell me about it. Yay, politics. Okay, we're not here to talk about any of those. Hey, I wanted to do this quick little tangent. If you were like me and using Mint for your finances, I found a cool replacement. Now, it's not free because, again, free is not a business model. But if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/monarch, MONARCH, and what this does is it really pulls in everything. I can see my loans. I can see my Bitcoin in Coinbase. I can see my bank. I can see my credit cards. I can see everything in one place. Makes it super easy to make a budget. And so I thought I would drop this in because it doesn't really apply to podcasting, but I get the feeling that you might be in the same boat. So check it out, schoolofpodcasting.com/monarch. And in full disclosure, of course, that's an affiliate link, but that's not why I'm telling you about it. I'm telling you about it because I think it's cool.